All right, morning everyone. So my presentation this morning is really going to build off what Scott's just done, and I'll take you through my journey with setting up PLCs through the HPT process. I have actually been on this journey for nearly 5 years. I started back in 2015 with Danielle out of school, and it was quite basic what I was trialling back then into the more sophisticated piece of work that we have now. So. Bit of background, I come from Mount Archer School in Rockhampton. So this is just what I'm going to take you through really quickly. We're going to look at my journey to date. We're going to look at meeting agendas. We're going to look at frequency, because that's been a big piece of work for us around how to actually get the frequency of meetings right so that people are getting the most out of every single meeting that you have. Our team data walls, and then what it looks like moving forward for us as well. All right, so some context about Mount Archer. Now, Scott talked about his school, and why was Scott about his decile and his IXIA and all that sort of thing. We're actually 30 below what Scott was, so I wish I was in your school, Scott. So we have 670 students at Mount Archer. It's an absolutely fantastic place. We have roughly four classes per cohort. Now, when I started in 2016, we had a school that was basically stable for around 20 years. We had teachers who had been there for 20, 25 years, taught together, knew the processes, and more or less they had, well, I am actually the only fourth principal the school's had since it opened. So the school's had principals there for 17 years, then 18 years, and then Trudy was one of those for a very short period of time in that mix as well. So I'm the fourth permanent principal at our school. So very, very stable, very consistent. In the last 3 years though, 55% of our staff have changed. So, and that's not me hunting them out as much as Danielle's laugh actually leads me to believe that's what she's thinking. Basically because all of that stability was based in teachers who had been there for 30 years. They had done their entire teaching journey at the school, and now they're all starting to retire. So I'm getting 7 to 8 new graduates every single year, not to mention all our new T-trades and staff turnover in that way. So for us, and the only reason I actually share that with you, because you all probably can tell me similar stories, the reason I share that is the PLC structure and the formula that we've got actually ensures that continuity of our programs and the consistency of our performance. All right. So why PLC? So in 2015, when I started looking and working with HPT, I actually started because I didn't know how to best manage teams. I had come from small schools and had small number of staff, small number of kids, and I needed to learn how to manage people. So that was part of my learning journey. And then as that evolved, I moved into how do I actually make teams effectively work together. So this is at Mount Archer, and the explanation why we continued working in this way at Mount Archer. So when I turned up, we had year level groups. In the first few weeks, I had all the year level coordinators come and talk to me, and one of the first things they said was, I have absolutely no idea what a year level coordinator does. Here's the folder I was given, so can you please tell me? And so we had a major problem. We had teams that had no leaders and no structure. Teachers worked in isolation, they did plan together occasionally, they did moderate, but that was it. Outside of that, it was very much in your classroom, doing your thing, coming to the weekly staff meeting. All right, student data was owned individually by the teachers. I am lucky enough to have some of the best teachers in Queensland, still do, even with all the change. Every teacher owned every student in their classroom, but they didn't care about anything outside of that. If the class next door's kids were failing, that's that teacher's problem to fix. Right, teachers were exceptionally reluctant, and still are to some extent, to have professional conversations with each other and give each other feedback. So they were happy to give the leadership team feedback, and that's something I learned very quickly at Mount Archer. But as far as giving each other feedback, unless it was directly impacting on them, they were happy to walk past it. All right, staff meetings were very unproductive. Like exceptionally, they were just the toilet blocks, shut down. We're cutting down these trees on Tuesday. This path's closed. The nurse will be in next Thursday. That's what our staff meetings basically were, And I more or less ran with that for probably about a term, 6 months, until I got my head around the school. And we need to develop that consistency. So we decided that that wasn't good enough and we needed to actually do better in a school our size for the kids that we had. Threw this up there. This basically explains my staff meetings when I turned up. More or less, this is the part that I'm going to focus on. I had experienced staff who sat at the end of it and waited for me to say something, and then they'd take turns in trying to shoot holes in it. And literally, I saw that happening in the back of my staff meetings. Someone going, well done, I'll get him on the next one. All right, so that's what our staff meetings look like. Basically, senior teachers waiting to line me or one of the deputies up anytime we presented anything. All right, that won't work because we can't do that, because that's not going to work for us. We've never done it that way. We're not doing that. That was our staff meetings. All right, so had to go into the PLC process, had to. It was essential for our school to move forward. So what I've got is a few slides here of my journey with setting up meetings and PLC structures. So this actually was my starting point in 2015-16. So this is when I was in Gladstone. Effectively, most of the things, who's done the HPT work with Peter or Danielle or Alistair? Some of you, half of you? Righto, so most of the agenda processes that they talk about, what we did was we took it and I just started inserting little bits and pieces of it into my general agenda. But in my defence, that's basically how I was led down the garden path. So we just started putting things in because that'll fix it. We'll do one-word barometers, we'll do icebreakers because that'll build our connection. But if you look through that, it's teacher aid timetables, it's events that are occurring. Nothing really changed other than I just put a few little bits into it. So then I moved to Mount Archer and the work we started to do got a lot more tight and rigid around our structure. So ran through the HPT process as more or less it was presented to us, and we started looking at this section in here and what that actually meant for us around how we could drive our school strategic agenda in those two processes. So here, as you can see, these are just areas that I identified as priorities for us, and we talked about them within our groups. The problem was I still hadn't figured out something really essential, is why I had started to value my year level coordinators and give them bits and pieces of information. What I hadn't done was actually start to really bring them into the process and the understanding of why we were talking about those things and how they needed to lead their staff. So every staff member could have told you about our assessment and guide to making judgment process, but I had teachers going to help other teachers and they didn't really know the strategic agenda behind it. They couldn't talk about the where to next and how we're driving this. So we played in this space and it became really effective, went across the school for 12 months, and basically that's how our meetings run more or less now, but we've tweaked them as we've gone along. So that still is very similar to what one of our PLC meetings would look like. This was my favourite quote though, once we started this process. So this was a man who has since retired, one of the 55% who has now gone. Came up to me after about 6 months of doing this and said that to me, and I wrote it down in my diary so I'd remember it. Basically, he was adamant that this was the worst thing in the world because there was that 1 hour a day that I could make, 1 hour a week, sorry, I could make him stay after school, and he couldn't have a power nap in the back of the meeting. Right, he could no longer throw barbs at me and tell me why, my ideas sucked and why it wouldn't work for our kids and you know nothing about this school. All right, he had to engage. And the reason he had to engage wasn't necessarily just because of the process, but it was these meetings, the way that we changed them was he went from a large group where at our staff meetings we'll have 40 teachers in a room, down into a group where there was 5 to 6 of them, And he was by far the most experienced person in that room. I couldn't even, say I had anywhere near as much experience as what he had when I sat in on those meetings. So for him, there was nowhere to hide. When there was a problem about behaviour, when there was a problem about curriculum, when there was a problem about, school process, if he didn't have the answer, probably no one in that school would at that point. So he had nowhere to go. So I've hung on to that for about 3 years now, so I really like it. Then we moved into this agenda. So this was 2017 and we started using a bit of a dashboard for monitoring our PLC's performance. So there's a couple of differences on here, and first one is this inquiry process, which we quickly discovered that although these two sections didn't change, our teachers didn't know how to question each other. They didn't know how to professionally engage with each other. And I know that sounds extremely odd, and I go back to what Scott said, we are all professionals and teachers do have that little piece of paper that says they're quite clever. Have you ever actually sat back and thought, how well can my teachers professionally question each other? So what we found out is if they can't do that, this will fail. Because all it will become is a presentation each week of someone who actually is giving it a go, and good on them, fantastic. But they're not actually prompting thought, they're not actually engaging the discussion at a higher level. And even if they presented in that way, they didn't have peers sitting there actually questioning and advancing the thought even further. So we had none of that. It was just a PD presentation little section, and that's what we did, or let's just run through the typical moderation process. There was no questioning. So we added in this, and I'll show you a little bit more about that in a minute. But we also added in this dashboard. Now this dashboard was really quite basic. So effectively we had 5 areas across the top, which were our focus areas that we wanted to measure. And then we set term targets for the whole school. And then in their little PLC groups, they actually set targets based on the data of the kids they had, knowing the kids they had. So what we were saying is we wanted 95% attendance was one, for all of our kids. So that was the term target for every group. But the Year 4s would look at their attendance from last year and say, well, these guys attended school for 79% of the time. Is 95% achievable in a term? Can we do that? So that was the negotiation. They had power and control over what targets they set. And then the accountability came in because at the end of the term we measured it. And if they improved, they had to reset another target. Keeping in mind the school target never changed. It was always what we said at the beginning of the year. So we started doing that, and along the bottom we actually started to get to know each other a little bit better and looking at the 4 KPIs and looking at what they needed to do as a core group to actually move their group forward as a little team in our school. So we started those things. So this is those inquiry process. So we teamed up with Pete and Lisa McDermott, and she came in and actually started to give us a bit of a framework of how we could get teachers engaging with each other. Now, this had a lot of traction. It still has a lot of traction. It's a great framework for getting teachers to plan a conversation and give them questions that they can use to support each other. So essentially what happens is there was a model one of these that was filled out in the work that Lisa gave us, and then there was a blank template, a bit of a lesson plan essentially. So if a teacher was presenting one of those 2 elements, either the research section or the classroom spotlight, they'd do up their lesson plan to present to the group. And questions down the side here to help everybody to engage in the conversation, not just the person presenting. And what we found by doing this is it actually started to give a bit of rigour to the conversation because they were starting to ask challenging questions of each other rather than just sit there and go, thanks for the presentation, I really appreciated that. All right. We had tips about how to do it. There was even advanced tips. So if their groups were functioning really well, they could go up to the next level and start advancing the types of questions and the type of engagement that they had with each other. And once again, same thing for their classroom deep dives. All right, and that is our agenda for this term as we sit now. We are also starting to head into looking at using a mini forum platform for our PLCs as well, and how we can get teachers to engage in a mini forum type meeting structure. And we're trialling that only with 1 or 2 of our PLCs. We're not doing it whole school yet. But this is hopefully the next evolution for us in the way that our teams engage with each other. Now, one of the things that we grappled with, and we did this, we've done a lot of things really brutally to our teachers at Mount Archer in the last 3 years since I've been there. Effectively, my go-to strategy is just go hard and go boots in and all up front, and we kill whoever we kill up front and we work our way back from there. So I'm getting better at that as a leader, but frequency is something that we learnt a lot of lessons about. So we had to figure out how often we were going to do PLCs. How were we going to fit it into, as you all know, everyone wants to talk about the general agendas within a school. So we trialled a couple of models. So 1-to-1, we called it. So modelling a staff meeting PLC, and going through like that. What we found was that actually probably pleased my teacher of 32 years a little bit more than some of my other models I'll talk to you about, because he still got 1 in every 2 meetings where he could have a nap at the back of the room. All right, and the other one, he could tolerate that for an hour, but not really commit to it. So we were finding there wasn't an engagement with the PLCs as much as what we really wanted to. So then we went to a 3-to-1 model. So where we do 3 PLCs and then 1 staff meeting. And while that was much better for the engagement with the PLC structure and how our teams actually function together, what we found was there was too long between drinks of getting everyone back together and having a group conversation. So then we settled on this 2-in-1 model, where we have 1 staff meeting, then 2 PLCs, 1 staff meeting, 2 PLCs. And we rotate through. So they get 3 staff meetings in a term and at least 6 PLC meetings in a term. Now, the reason we settled on that is we found that obviously we got a little bit more sophisticated with our PLC structures. Our teams are quite tight at Mount Archer. We know each other really well, so we can rotate that frequently and the engagement stays high. But it also gave everyone a chance to be back together. And this is the thing that I didn't appreciate when I started playing with this. I actually thought staff meetings were rubbish. That's still the case. And, I ask any of my teachers, they'll tell you that's my belief. But what I didn't appreciate was why some of them actually wanted to be together. And what they wanted to be together for in a whole staff meeting was about connectedness and collegialness as a whole staff. Because when I broke them out into their 7 or 8 groups, what I effectively told them was, you will play with that set of people, and these ones over here, you don't get to play with anymore. All right? And I didn't actually see, and I should have known this from my own personal experience, but even those senior teachers who hated meetings and hated turning up, they were networking, they were connecting, they were checking on beginning teachers, they were finding out about what's going on in different year levels. They might know about a camp that's happening on a different year level, and they'll just touch base with people, all either during, before, or after that meeting was occurring, on text while I'm talking in a staff meeting. They're doing that together as a group, and I effectively just said, well, nah, buggy, I'm going to take that away from you. So we came back to the 2-in-1 model because what that did is it gave them back that connectedness. They didn't feel completely disconnected, and then we still had enough PLCs to keep that energy moving forward as we went along. All right, so data walls and team data walls. These are just pictures, and they cross from 2016 through until where we are over here now. Effectively, they are more or less the HPT work put up on the wall, but over time we've made a little bit more sophisticated about the way we present it. So initially, here's a communique, like Scott was talking about, our team structures, and our goals for us as a school. That's what it looked like in 2016. 2017, and I know that's a terrible picture, I apologise for that, we just started to break our teams apart and have them by themselves and get some information about the teams up. 2018, we did the same thing, but we added in all the colours, right? And I'll actually just labour on the colours for a second. I've done Myers-Briggs, I've done odds identities, I've done all those things, and so had all of my staff, by the way. And that was pointed out to me by a number of my teachers who have been teaching for 30 years. We've done this before, all right? I know who I am. The colours was the only thing that had stuck with them. That same teacher who gave me that quote, which I'll use for years to come, actually, I caught him one day, he ran through the office, sort of barked out an order in the friendly, aggressive, assertive way that he does, and everyone was happy with that, ran out the door, and then comes flying back in and apologised to the admin lady and goes, "I'm sorry, I'm blue," and then runs back out the door again. No other conversation, just "I'm blue," and then left. All right, so, you know, it actually stuck with those teachers, whether it's the simplicity of just the 4 colours, I'm not sure what it was, but it stuck. And at our place, it actually means a hell of a lot. So we invest in that, we use that language a lot, and it actually explains a lot. I redid the colour activity this year with everyone, and our teacher aides in particular love doing it when they're assigned to teachers, because then they get to see their personalities and see what that looks like, and that explains why that teacher doesn't talk to me as much as that one does, and that sort of thing. So the colours is actually essential for us at our place and around our team walls. And then this year, what we've done is we've taken it a little step further, and we've taken their talent map, their colours, their secret skills, and all of those things, and condensed it into one chart. So if you look at a group, you can actually see who they are in a little snapshot, and their e-pulse sits underneath it. So Scott made fun of the e-pulse, and you know, there's been times I've grappled with that as well, but it is essential to our conversations in our PLC groups. And one of the things that we really needed to work on, so within our primary school, teachers actually believe the e-pulse was a great way of punishing the admin team. We'll mark it as red, and that'll teach those bastards up there that they're doing the wrong thing. But what they didn't realise was it actually had nothing to do with us. So we had to spend a lot of time, you know, working with our teams to see that the e-pulse, those 4 questions that take 5 seconds to do, actually they own that, and they need to own it if they're going to function as a team. So it's now a core part of what it is, and it's great to sit in our PLC meetings and watch our cohort leaders unpack that with their group and try and investigate what's going on with work-life balance, what's going on with co-worker support, why aren't we giving each other enough feedback, and the language changed from why aren't we to why aren't they. You know, it was they, it's now we. Why aren't we doing that? This is our school data wall, and this is just a snapshot of what our team profiles look like now. So this year, for the first time, we went to a whole staff one as well, which is interesting and very scary for the blue people like myself. I'm one of 7 in a staff of, I think there's 80 of us who have done it, so we're very few on the ground. So 2018, this is our school strategic work up top, and our HPT sat underneath it, and we've done very similar this year as well, because everything that's working at our school actually sits on the foundation that we can have rigorous conversations in our teams. We'll challenge each other, and then everyone understands who they're working with and how they're engaging with each other. So this is what our wall looks like if you were to come into our staff room now. We've once again got our HPT teams along the bottom, and we moved into the space last year and did it again this year of setting a vision for each year level. So each of our year levels have their own vision that they're actually targeting for their grade 2s, their grade 4s, whatever it is. And they've unpacked that, which is these documents along here. The other thing that is essential, and as a principal, I really enjoyed this last year because Pete had worked with me around protocols and having difficult conversations. And while when he first taught that to us, basically within I think it was 2 weeks, I had 5 process meetings with my admin team. They all had a burning issue they wanted to get off their chest with me. We had none with our teachers. Our teachers have never had a difficult conversation using our protocol before. However, last year we had a union issue where one teacher went after another teacher, and they were really getting quite nasty. Anyway, the union came in and sat down, and I more or less grabbed that protocol off the wall, stuck it down in front of the teacher and the union rep and said, "So what of this have you followed?" And they said, "Well, I didn't follow it at all." So anyway, conversation continued, and in the end they all left. The union rep came back in and said there is absolutely nothing she can do because she has not followed one process to solve her issues, to settle her differences. And we had some of the clearest processes that he had seen in a state school for teachers to work together and collaboratively solve their issues. So cannot stress enough how powerful the protocols are. Warning as a principal, you may find people want to have a chip at you straight up, which is great, but it always sits there as a safety net in the background. So I really value that as a process as well. All right, so my hard learnt lessons. So for me, a large majority of our content delivered in general staff meetings can be easily transferred to other types of communication. So Scott talked about communicate, communicate, communicate. We do that. We basically have farmed out every bit of small information that doesn't need to be presented by me or someone paid $100,000 a year into written format, because it is fair enough to expect teachers to read. So we have weekly newsletters, we put it on our intranet. We have a staff app where we upload all of our documentation and have anything and everything on there that they might need. So there is no reason why they can't find any information at any point in time, 24 hours a day. Teachers value their time together as a whole group. You need to make sure that you don't undervalue that. I learnt that the hard way. And it was, and that's the thing I didn't talk about, was status as well. And we took away the social connection, but what I actually took away from those senior teachers was their status in the school, because they could be important in a group of 6, right? But these were people that had 30 years of being important in a group of 80, and I just took that away from them. So really important that you value that. All right, never underestimate the need to have your middle leaders' knowledge high when rolling out strategies. I rolled out a lot of HPT stuff, a lot of curriculum work, a lot of pedagogical work, and I have leveraged the fact that I have really good cohort leaders who have regular meetings following these processes with me, have difficult conversations following these processes with me, so they are crystal clear about what, why and how before it goes back to the rest of the staff. And I would argue now 80% of my work in rolling out any change at our school is done. I could come up with any idea tomorrow and give it a couple of weeks, a couple of cohort leaders meetings, and we could get it through. All right, professional learning about process and behaviours is essential. Value the entire process. Teams need to know who they are. You as a leader need to know who you are and how you engage with people. I'm still working on monitoring my introverted blue, which is probably the opposite to Scott. And provide structures for teachers to engage professionally. And this is something that our admin team's gone back to at the beginning of this year. Our teachers still aren't 100% confident with asking each other questions and engaging in challenging conversations with each other. We are heavily research driven. Our entire school runs from multiple levels of research. But what I've presumed along the way is, because I've been giving teachers that research, I've been asking those questions, what I forgot to actually understand is that they're not doing it, they're not coming, they're not learning on the journey with me, they're just coming on the journey with me. So you need to value that and make sure that they're professionally engaging in difficult conversations and helping them to do so. And the last one, which we have had huge traction from this year, because we had some hangover problems from last year. So what we've taken to doing is actually modelling any part of a PLC meeting that teachers are having trouble with as a whole staff. So our admin team sits down, plonk right in the middle of the staff meeting. Everyone just sits around us, and we run a section just with the 6 of us and forget that everyone else is there, and we model exactly what we want to see. And from doing that a couple of times, the difference in our meetings, our PLC meetings within year levels, has been huge. So model what you actually want, and I know it's hard, but what we had to do was say, well, how could we do it? What would that look like? And what it actually looks like is 50 people staring at us awkwardly while we just have a little meeting within a meeting. Okay, so value that, because that's something I wish I actually learnt 2 years ago and did 2 years ago. All right, so not sure how I'm going for time.
We're almost out, but keep going.
Excellent. So just have a couple of questions for you that I'll actually get you to think about and push back into your groups and into your tables and start thinking about. So how do you manage teachers working in isolation with reluctance to give feedback to peers and inconsistencies in practice? So how do you do that, and how do you manage that within your school? The second one is, how do you create teaching team structures such as agendas, dashboards and data walls to help drive teaching team performance? If you've got them, are they working? Are they working well enough? All right. And then the third one, just for you to discuss within your group, is within your meetings, how well do you optimise the balance between teacher capability development, and the focus on student-specific improvement? Because that's a balance that we've had to monitor as we've gone along. And so I suppose what I'll get you to do is, at your tables, in your groups, if you can pick one, pick two, start having that discussion, and I'm sure Peter will find out how we go. So at your tables, if you can pick one of those questions and start having the discussion.